Hello, class, and welcome to Chapter 9, where we'll talk a little bit about genetics and the patterns of inheritance. I'm going to go ahead and jump right away, talking a little bit about genetics and heredity. So, heredity is the transmission of traits from one generation to the next, and genetics is the scientific study of heredity. You've probably heard of Gregor Mendel. He's kind of known for his work in the 1860s, and he found out that parents pass on to their offspring discrete genes that he called heritable factors. These genes are responsible for inherited traits, and the genes will retain their individual identities generation after generation. So this is a look at Mendel. What he did is he chose to study garden peas because they were easy to grow and came in many readily distinguishable varieties. He found that a character is a heritable feature, one that you can inherit, that varies among individuals, and a trait will be a variant of a character. And each of the characters Mendel studied occurred in two distinct traits. And perhaps the most important advantage of the pea plants as an experimental model was that Mendel could easily and strictly control their reproduction. So this is a look at the structure of a pea flower. There's the petal, the stamen, which will release the sperm-producing pollen, and then the carpel, which produces eggs. So when Mendel wanted to fertilize one plant with pollen from a different plant, he pollinated the plants by hand, and then he was always sure of the parentage of his new plants. And Mendel created purebred varieties of plants and then crossed two different purebred varieties. So basically, he was able to control how these plants fertilized so then he could control and study the characteristics or traits. Hybrids are the offspring of two different purebred varieties, and the cross fertilization itself is referred to as a genetic cross. The parental plants are the P generation, their hybrid offspring are the F1 generation, and then the cross of the F1 plants forms the F2 generation. So Mendel performed many of these experiments in which he could track the inheritance of characters like flower color that occur as two alternative traits, and the results led him to formulate several hypotheses about inheritance. So these were kind of the seven characters of pea plants that he studied. He looked at flower color, the dominant and recessive, the flower position, the seed color, the seed shape, the pod color, and the stem length. So I'm going to show you kind of the pictures a little bit of how he cross-tracked one character. He took pure flowers and white flowers in the purebred parents to get all plants would have purple flowers, showing that purple would be the dominant trait. And then he would fertilize among the F1 plants to get the F2 generation to show that three-quarters of the plants would have a purple flower, but a quarter of the plants would actually have a white flower as the recessive trait. So his law of segregation of an inheritance of a single character states that there are alternative versions of genes that account for variations in these inherited characteristics, and these are called alleles. And for each inherited character, an organism inherits two alleles, one from each parent. And an organism that has two identical alleles for a gene is said to be homozygous, and an organism that has two different alleles for a gene is said to be heterozygous. If an organism has two different alleles for a gene, one allele will determine the organism's appearance and is called the dominant allele, and the other allele has no noticeable effect on the organism's appearance, and this is called the recessive allele. And geneticists use uppercase italic letters such as P to represent dominant alleles and lowercase italic letters such as the lowercase p to represent recessive alleles. A sperm or egg carries only one allele for each inherited character because the two alleles for a character will segregate or separate from each other during the production of gametes, and this statement is called the law of segregation. When a sperm and egg unite at fertilization, each will contribute its alleles, which will restore the paired condition to the offspring. So this is a look at that law of segregation. The alleles that come through in the dominant alleles would be uppercase P, and the recessive alleles would be lowercase p. And you can use this 4x4 or 2x2 cross chart to show how you would get the ratios of the offspring as well. A Punnett square is what that 2 by 2 is. It's four possible combinations of gametes showing the resulting four possible offspring. And geneticists will distinguish between an organism's physical appearance or its phenotype and the genetic makeup or its genotype. So Mendel found that each of the seven characteristics he studied had the same inheritance pattern going through his Punnett square. Looking forward at kind of the next diagram, it will show a pair of homologous chromosomes, which are chromosomes that carry alleles of the same genes. And a gene locus is a specific location of a gene along a chromosome. Alleles are alternative versions of a gene. They'll reside at the same locus on homologous chromosomes. However, the two chromosomes may bear either identical alleles or different ones at any one locus. So here we have the locus shown on the different locations of the homologous chromosomes. And the genotype PP would be homozygous for the dominant allele. AA would be homozygous for the recessive allele, and a heterozygous would be uppercase b, lowercase p for the one dominant and one recessive allele. So Mendel deduced his law of segregation by following one character through two generations, and he found that a cross between two individuals that are heterozygous for one character is called a monohybrid cross. And what would result from a dihybrid cross would be a cross between two organisms that are each heterozygous for two characters being followed. All right, so moving a little bit forward, basically what he's doing now is he's testing these alternative hypotheses for gene assortment in a dihybrid cross. So he's getting the gametes to produce the F1 generation, and in the F2 generation, then he has to make a Punnett square of all possible offspring. Mendel's dihybrid cross supported the hypothesis that each pair of alleles will segregate independently of the other pairs during gamete formation, and thus the inheritance of one character will have no effect on the inheritance of another. And this is called Mendel's law of independent assortment. So I'll let you guys look through kind of the rest of this and read through the chapter on your own. I wanted to go through Mendel and to talk a little bit about other dominant and recessive traits, being a widow's peak would be a dominant trait, and a recessive peak would be a hairline. Please let me know if you guys have any questions on this as you work your way, working through the Punnett squares, as you're working your way through the active reading assignments. And we will see you for the next PowerPoint. Thanks for listening, everybody.